So good afternoon, everybody. Mary Hunt here at the Water Office, along with Annalie Martin, Diane New, and Joe Cinto. We are delighted to have you with us today for our tea on Tuesday, March 23rd, 2021, Finding Your Voice and Then Using It with Rosemary Ganley. And we're going to be talking about Rosemary's book, or at least I am, Positive Community, columns from the Peterborough Examiner 2015 to 2018. This is a compilation of about 100 essays, 650 words a piece, thereabouts, that Rosemary did in that period. And I'm happy to announce that there is another volume promised. So for hardcore Rosemary Ganley fans like myself, this is not, this isn't it, Rosemary. We're waiting for the next one. I want to welcome all of you, especially those who are new to our tea. We are delighted to have you with us on a beautiful spring day in Washington. Cherry blossoms are coming out. When I picked up Joe this morning, we drove through the Academy of the Holy Cross, where Diane's and my daughter went to school for high school, knowing that they had cherry trees, and they are, I would say, 3/4 out. It was an absolutely beautiful drive. Water programs, as you know, are aimed at supporting and igniting social change. Whether in theology, ethics, or ritual, all our efforts at Water are geared to bring together solid academic, scholarly data with the activist commitments of our alliance. Rosemary Ganley is the epitome of this work, a woman of complex faith, direct action, and enviable prose. So I will introduce Rosemary. She will offer some introductory remarks about her book and the many essays that the lucky people of Peterborough, Ontario get to read each week or so. And then we'll open the floor for discussion, for questions and other issues that people might want to raise. We always end at the top of the hour, so that will be 3 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time, though the Zoom link will stay open, so you're more than welcome to stay on and chat and greet your friends and continue the conversation. But we try to finish our business, as it were, by the top of the hour so that we have a graceful exit for those who have blocked that out in their calendar, and a time for others to continue in conversation as they wish. But the substance of our work will be contained in the hour. We do record this, and if you are not wanting to be recorded for some reason of your own, just take your name down and keep your video off, and you can certainly listen and enjoy the conversation without being part of the record. So after we finish this video, along with all the other Water programs, will be on our website at www.waterwomensalliance.org. And we'll have some notes that we take along the way, and Rosemary will have a quick gander at them in case we miss terms or misspell. And we will put those up as well. So people who like to learn by reading rather than listening will have an opportunity to do that. So those are the organizational details. And with that, I begin with a brief introduction of Rosemary B. Ganley, or whom I've come to think of as my own RBG. So I will introduce Rosemary, and then we'll continue with her presentation. The B stands for Burns, as Rosemary says. The Irish Burns of my illiterate ancestors who escaped the famine to settle on farms in Eastern Ontario. Rosemary Ganley is first and foremost a feminist whose long career includes teaching, writing, and activism. She and her husband, John, founded the development agency Jamaican Self-Help in 1980 during their years living there with their sons, and their 3 sons in Jamaica. She wrote a book about it called Jamaica Journal, which shows the care with which they did their international work. They really, I think, were, Rosemary, I think you and John were very ahead of this curve in terms of what it means to do international work in a way that's respectful. They also worked for several years in Tanzania, again, learning how to be global citizens with deep roots in Canada. The Beijing Women's Conference, 4th UN Conference on Women in 1995, was clearly a life-changing experience for Rosemary. She took a great deal of global experience of her own to that setting, and she met with women with whom she could deepen her feminist analysis of the world's problems. I dare say the world has never been the same since. I first came to know Rosemary's byline from 2001 to 2006 in the late, great Catholic New Times, a progressive publication that we in the United States came to rely on for international perspectives and progressive ideas in the Catholic community. Little did I imagine, Rosemary, that we would become friends through the Women Church Convergence and through water. Rosemary's writing has been in the Globe and Mail, the Toronto Star, and as we'll hear today, the Peterborough Examiner, from which the essays in this book are excerpted. She's also written in the Green Teacher and in Conscience Magazine of Catholics for Choice, for which she was a longtime Canadian leader. Rosemary was introduced into the Peterborough Pathway of Fame in 2011 and received the YMCA Peace Medal in 2018 for reasons we can all applaud. In 2018, she served on Prime Minister Trudeau's 19-person Gender Equality Advisory Council for the G7 meetings in Quebec. And this season alone, she's been involved in several Canadian women's events that have garnered large audiences and plenty of intersectional justice making. When the book came out, here's what Water said about it. Quote, regular newspaper columnist Rosemary Ganley is a Renaissance woman, writer, speaker, activist, spiritual sage, bicycle rider, intellectual. It's hard to read about her loss of a child and edifying to glimpse her mother. It's challenging to see the Camino de Santiago through her eyes and comforting to know Canada is a stalwart neighbor despite the US recalcitrance. Water awaits the next volume, 2019 to 2021, as Peterborough continues to get its regular reading treat. We at Water are delighted to have Rosemary with us as a speaker today, and again in April when she will lead our meditation group, of which she's been a member for some years. I welcome you, Rosemary, on the week of your 84th birthday, which will be on the 25th. Let our time together today be a lovely beginning of that celebration, appropriately with people from around the world. Tell that to your 8 grandchildren and thank them for sharing you with us. Welcome, Rosemary, and show us the way on finding our voices and using them. Rosemary.
Oh, Mary, I'm overwhelmed, and maybe we should just stop there and put that aside for the funeral service.
This is not the funeral service, Rosemary. Get clear on that.
No, not yet, not this week.
Not this week, not intensive.
In Canada these days, and for the last couple of years, we've been acknowledging every public event by acknowledging the land. And so I will start with that. I'm a settler and I'm on the territory, traditional territory, and respectful of the Mississauga and Anishinaabe who have preserved these lands for hundreds of years. I'd like to pay tribute to you for spending this hour of what's a lovely afternoon, March 23rd. I'd like to ask you, just wave your hand if you've had your first shot. We in Canada, we're always a little slower, more reflective, we say, but the Americans are doing one great job. I think 15% of your people are vaccinated. That's tremendous. And I also want to pay tribute to Water. During the pandemic, the 5 years that it has lasted, I've been supported in every way by Water. 4 events a month, meditative, intellectual, social, spiritual. And I have a deep connection with Jamaica. And Mary, in Jamaica, when someone praises another, you big them up. And so what you do with one of your gifts, Mary, is to big up other women in the struggle. And that's how I feel today. I have a short poem to begin with by Mary Oliver. I think she was just made for us and our groups. Instructions for living a life. It's only 7 words. Instructions for living a life. Pay attention, be astonished, tell about it. And I will also tell my story. I'm at the age where if anyone can benefit from looking at a life, I'm more than happy to share. and pick it over and reject what doesn't suit you. Remember, we feminists have struggled a long time to assert the autonomy of each of us, listen to our own souls. And so while we look at another woman's life and we take joy from it, it's not an imitative process. It's oh, that gives me an idea. Maybe I'll do that sometime, or maybe I won't. But I'm glad she's doing it. And then just behind me, my granddaughter, she's 18, and she's penned up in Edmonton. And she said, Grandma, I'd like to do you a piece of art for your birthday. And I said, the Sankofa bird. And so she learned about it, and it's on my wall. And it was introduced, it's a mythic bird from Ghana. And it was introduced to me by the first Black Canadian to serve in the House of Commons in Ottawa, Jean Augustine. And it's very suggestive. It's a bird that can twist its neck all the way around and pick up a seed or an egg. And it's what we Christian women are doing today. We are rescuing what's worthy from our tradition and being strengthened by it and changing it. And it carries with it our own history, the critique of much of what goes on today. My article on my birthday in the Examiner is called, and I think I stole this headline, "The Pope Gives Us Whiplash." I had just written a story praising his trip to Iraq. It was brave and well-informed. And then he signs that harmful document. So what I will do was just use my voice. I think people in this town, it's a town of 100,000, and I've written for 5 years. I think they know what my take will be. But if anybody in ecclesial authority will be listening, it'll be there. And it will decry the state of affairs. And other writers have done it much more strongly. Mary herself has written in Religion Dispatches and dispatched those arguments that have, some of our words may save a life when we use our reputation. All we have is our good name, and use our reputation to say to authority, to power, especially religious powers, because they have a special hold over young minds, because they appropriate themselves holiness. But what their pronouncements may lead to a young person being described as sinful, and that's heartbreaking. That is heartbreaking. And that's for, how did I get started writing? Well, I like high school boys. I like their big feet up on desks. I like their ball hats backwards. I could talk sports with them. Just ask me anything about professional sports, because I raised 3 sons. And one of them said to me, Mrs. Ganley, you're always giving us writing assignments, and it gives us grief. And do you write? And I took that home and thought about it that weekend and thought, there's a vulnerability. By the way, in that classroom, I had a sign that said, everything you produce is going to be postered, produced, or printed. So they all wrote, mind you, private journaling is very valuable for our soul's sake. But everything in that classroom was going to be made public. And he challenged me. So when I retired from high school teaching, I thought I'm going to treat myself to a world conference. I mean, there's lots of laughter in Peterborough. We have some really globally minded people. They said, oh my God, the United Nations is having a world conference on women. Who's going from here? And we started to fundraise, and we sent 5 people. Anyway, when I came home, I self-published this at the local printery, this book of reflections, there's 20, on the whole Beijing experience. And a lot of it is spiritually based. I called Beijing a sacred space. Now, that was my first, and I had not been discovered by the publishing world, so I self-publish. And you can be coil bound, cheap, you know, work with the local printer. But life is full of the most amazing surprises. Last Women's Day, March 8th, when we still could walk on the street, I saw the federal Minister of Women's Affairs. She's very enlightened. She's a friend of mine. She's an Afghan refugee. She's 35 years old, and she's in the parade carrying this book. She's a devout Muslim. I have connections with spiritually minded women from any faith. And that's what WATER does. What WATER brought me this year, the ideas of Susan Brooks Thistlethwaite, who calls herself a public theologian. Yeah, thanks for the phrase, Susan. It brought me Elizabeth Ersick, who talks theology and the arts. She's a musician. It brought me 2 evangelical pastors, and they are feminist. And you think we have struggles? How about you're an American feminist theologian in the evangelical tradition? Now that, and they write, they publish and they teach. And they have such a body of work and propaganda and ideology to challenge. So that's the Beijing book. Then I worked for Catholic New Times and went through lymphatic cancer. I took the bus to Toronto. That was a good period. But we didn't know how to market, but we didn't know how to go digital. We had 30,000 subscribers. But anyway, it folded up. But it was that period that I decided the story of Jamaican self-help. That's Jamaica Journal. It's the story of a grassroots Canadian aid organization, self-published. How do you self-publish? You get somebody and pay her who knows how to format, because the publisher is called Kindle Direct Publishing. You just send off your manuscript. They don't care what's in it. They only care about the formatting. And they send you back a proof copy. How much does it cost? Maybe $8 per copy. And if you get 200 copies printed, then you earn back maybe a third of that. But you've had a lot of fun, and you're published. But publishers in Canada say, oh, we'll get back to you in a year. Can't do that. So then the Examiner, that's what Mary was talking about. Now that's a soulful photo, isn't it? We were trying to save a watershed. But this is what are the topics? For example, my sister, she says, I know your formula. You try to bring in the reader by a little joke or a little personal anecdote. Then you move on to something more substantial, but keep it local. The editor loves names all over, that means sales. And then you have something kind of global and substantial in your argument. And then you sign off cheerfully. And I said, Dad, that's my formula. I didn't learn it, but I mean, nobody taught it to me. But who wants to make a day heavier for your reader? By the way, Wendell Berry, you know the great Quaker writer in Pendle Hill? He has said, this is another one of saying that guides my life, be joyful, even though you have considered all the evidence. I find that kind of comes naturally, but I do agree with it. Be joyful, even though you have considered all the evidence. Now, here's some of the topics. Oh, basic annual income is one of my recent topics. A program where bicyclists take a blind cyclist on the back. It's called Tandem Eyes. I thought that's a good news story. There's so much goodness if you open your eyes. And then another one about women in a fitness class called Dangerous Old Ladies. Another one was about meditation, communal meditation that I learned from Nancy Sylvester. Now, some of my friends say, how do you get all that religious stuff in the secular paper? Well, that's an editor who knows there's a thirst beyond the material in every human heart. I don't use the word God or New Testament or Jesus. It's been so badly used for propping up various ideologies, but I recognize goodness. Then another one, My Mother, My Heroine, The Camino, What Did I Learn? Saving the CBC. We Canadians, we are blessed by having a publicly funded independent broadcaster, $35 a year per Canadian. So it has not been subverted as like Fox News. It's reliable. Oh, and then Beauty in the Art of Russia, Resisting Trumpism. I think I wrote 5 or 6 on resisting Trumpism. Where did I get my ideas? From you. And then Woe in the United States. Well, now you're busy about setting aside woe. We see it. We're heartened by it. Now, Mary, I think that's, according to my clock. Oh, but I did want to just mention the Sustainable Development Goals. Remember, we're children of the world, and we're facing a climate crisis. And so as citizens of the world, we follow United Nations developments. Oh, there's been some wonderful ones. The Secretary General has announced he's a feminist. He said that in the General Assembly. Our Prime Minister has announced he's a feminist. Your president acts, certainly, whether he'll declare it or not, he's got a lot on his plate, but he acts in empowering feminist ways. So here's the UN. They're the goals, just aspirational goals for 2030. Poverty, clean water, quality education. Number 5, gender equality, is considered very important in the achievement of the others. I just keep that around sometimes talk to university students, they've heard of it. Here we have a global education center that has workshops on, just so that our people here in this small Ontario city will know the terms. They could read the editorials. And it's going to shape our goals and our activities. And there's 17. Now I'll stop and welcome comments and questions.
Thank you very much to Rosemary Ganley for this wonderful presentation of finding your voice and using it very, very well in so many different ways on so many different topics. I stand by my introduction and think that I might have understated things a little.
No.
And I said Renaissance women. I don't think the Renaissance women were ready for postmodernity, Rosemary, but you are. The book that we're talking about, in at least in part, is Positive Community Columns from the Peterborough Examiner 2015 to 18, and you can get it on online through Amazon, the usual places. Although I think a lot of us are boycotting Amazon this week because of the union busting and so forth, but
Right.
The book is available. Rosemary, thank you. I learned something new. I love the Wendell Berry quote, and I love the Mary Oliver poem. And I think that your choice of sources is great. I have a bunch of questions, and I'm going to hold myself back. The floor is open. We'll start with Adrian. Go ahead.
Actually, it's Rita Mary, Rosemary.
Oh, hi.
Hi.
Oh, Rita Mary. Sorry, it says Adrian.
I just want to say, over the years, we've been in Catholic Teachers Organization together.
Yeah.
We were part of, I read Catholic New Times and subscribed faithfully for all the time it was alive, and read your stuff and was moved by your stuff. Then there were the 4 Cs, the Canadian Coalition, the Canadian Catholic Coalition, when the sexual abuse
Yes.
in Newfoundland was raging. So the 4 Cs we called it. Then there was the Catholic Network for Women's Equality,
Yeah.
which you were very active in. And now seeing you and hearing your voice on these water programs has been wonderful. And I always said to myself that I was really happy that you were doing what you were doing. And now I'm just listening to you today and saying, I'm going to be 85 this year, by the way, Rosemary.
That's good.
Yeah. Happy birthday next week. Now I'm saying I have to do something. I've been online with groups that I belong to in Zoom groups, and we've certainly have gone over that statement from last week and the horror,
Yeah.
the appalling statement with groups. So that's a start. And I usually raised it. But this whole thing of writing, I'm feeling today that maybe I should do something. We have a weekly here in town, and there's a religion article. And I thought, well, I'd like to write something on scripture, interpreting scripture, because it will be different from the pastor who writes. But now I'm thinking maybe that, or get off the pot and write. So I'll let you know if it happens.
Yeah.
Thank you for your activism and your consistent, you and John both consistent, standing up and using your voice for 60 years at least, maybe more. Yeah. Thanks, Rosemary.
Thank you. Thank you. These are the cloud of witnesses of which the scripture speaks. What more can we say?
We'll look forward to your writing. Make sure that we get it here at Water so we can.
Yeah. All I would like to lift from women is the should.
Oh, yeah.
We've done. Now we would choose to do this. And Rita Mary, big papers used to have religion editors, really people who were well educated in theology and in more than one religion. but they've cut those departments. So there's an opportunity for us if we stay broadly interspiritual
Oh, yeah.
and honor, yes, but I would welcome it. All right, what do we do with rejection? Well, we have the sense of humor. For example, one day I went into our newspaper office, and it used to have 30 journalists with eye shades, you know, like the old movies. Now it has nobody. It has a television screen. It's full of analytics. And I go in, and there's the editor. And he says, "Oh, Rosemary, your story was read by 800 people this morning."
Wow.
And I think, and I big myself up, Mary.
Big.
And then he says, "But the hockey story got 2,200. So, so you've got to be glad at the 800, right? Oh, and my adversaries, Dan Berrigan once said, "I have no enemies. I have adversaries." And I have well-known adversaries in town. One writes me, and he starts every letter objecting to my position by saying, "Yada, yada, yada." That's what he says. I mean, is that not laughable? But once I was accosted, like a little old lady with a shopping bag going across a parking lot at a supermarket, and a car goes by me, and the window rolled down, and the young man, well, he's a Marine, like 45, he says, "You're not a Catholic. Catholics are against abortion." And I thought, oh, I guess I should take his license plate down. But what I mean is, that's my experience of resistance. Well, the president of Trent University calls me regularly, and he says, "Rosemary," he's 90, "Rosemary, I read your piece. I didn't agree." So we have a nice chat. And if we can keep like things civil, where did I copied this yesterday? Get comfortable saying, "Thanks for correcting me. I didn't realize that." It was just on Facebook. I hadn't thought of that. I understand now. Or, "I was wrong about that. I changed my mind." If we can recover civility in discourse, you know, the United Nations ambassador for the climate is a Canadian from the Northwest Territories named Mark Carney. I'm a big fan of Mark Carney. And his book is called Values. He was governor of the Bank of England and governor of the Bank of Canada. So he's got his credentials. But I'm going to go around promoting, and I will write about, in terms that a grade 9 reader can read, Mark Carney's ideas about values as he does his work as a climate. Now that's a long answer, Rita Mary, but just laugh at the resistance and keep true to whatever vision you've been blessed with, and you have. Next.
Thank you both. Sarah, I think you had your hand up.
There we go. Okay.
Yeah.
Yes, go ahead.
I was stuck at a long red light this morning on my way out, and there, to my right was a church where people had gathered all in black for a funeral, and they were standing around out in front. And as I sat at the light, I remembered you and our correspondence at the time that Marianne died, and
Yes.
you encountered that terrible loss. And I remembered your saying to me that you were not in black, that you wore, I forget if it was white or a bright color to the funeral. And I thought she was teaching even then you brought that attitude into the tragedy, and before I knew it, you were off to the three winds, the Africa or Jamaica or wherever. So you, I think you were started very soon. That's it.
How lovely of water to bring this encounter together. I don't write very much about that loss, but what I was learning at that, our daughter was just sick for 2 days with encephalitis. What I learned how to behave was from the community. There were a lot of teachers and students and awkward teenagers trying to offer us their sorrow.
Yes.
So often I am a true believer in this sisterhood that we've created at Water over Zooms and other communities, and learning the best habits from each other. So that's beautiful, you remember. But I remember the month after that death, our friends, it was Christian Family Movement, maybe some of you remember, CFM. They came to our house, and I'm sure they had a roster, and they brought me pills and liquor, and I took it all for a month, just kind of numbing yourself. Yeah. Okay, thanks, Sarah. Thank you, Sarah.
Thank you, Rosemary. Yeah, you mentioned the loss of your child in the book, but it's very moving. Who's next? I have a quick question. Who gives the titles to these? Do you or does your editor?
Oh, well, it's a skeleton staff. I usually offer, and I try to make a little alliteration or a bit of wit, like the Pope and Whiplash. But then there's a night editor who has the final say. And sometimes they're good, and sometimes they have very little to do with the content. But there's always next week.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. Yeah.
Veronica.
Yes, Veronica Dunn, please go ahead.
Rosemary, I was remembering one of the adventures I had with you was in Toronto at the time that the Pope was visiting. And we formed our little group and created the Alternative World Youth Days.
Oh,
and,
yeah.
And for me, that was such a lesson in how a small group of people could wind up having a very large voice. Yeah. Because we presented an alternative. Do you want to say anything about that?
Oh, sure. It was 2002, and John Paul was coming to a youth conference in Toronto. Yeah. And we alternative thinkers, we're still full of faith. Do not say we are not faith. We are full of faith. We're just not the way you're operating. We decided to have an alternative conference. We got some money from Catholics for Choice, Washington. They said, oh yeah, that sounds like fun. We tried to get Catholic property. You can't get Catholic property to have an alternative. So we got the Anglican Church downtown, and we planned 5 days of program. And of course, we got the media. I mean, somebody's going to speak out against these papal events. All the teaching, they gather these youth into large crowds, and then the bishops evangelize. Imagine, not a lay voice, not a feminist voice. However, but I remember one German bishop came and visited us in the Anglican Church and said he really approved. He would like more dialogue. But that was 2002. So yes, I mean, 2 is sisterhood and 3 is a group. And especially when you love and respect, the folks that think the same way, or we don't have to think exactly the same on every issue. like the president of Trent, who disagrees with me on some things. I guess I haven't written well enough.
Great. Who's
Betsy
next?
McGregor? Betsy, do you want to?
Oh, it's my pleasure. As someone who brushed shoulders in 30,000 women crowd in Beijing, somewhere in the
Yeah.
mix was Rosemary and myself with some women veterinarians. And then we established our own non-governmental organizations around the world. And somehow we ended up back in Peterborough together and teaching continuing education at Trent and working out on the gymnasium bicycle. And I just wanted to speak to the graciousness of Rosemary and the beauty of her soul, not only in our country, but in our community, to really stretch the soul, stretch the imagination. And one of her articles was Melinda, Malala, and me.
Yeah.
When she ended up on the Prime Minister's task force advising the G7 when Canada was presidency, but with such humility and graciousness and such a quiet wisdom that it sneaks up on you. And it carries the power of a soul that is bless everyone who crosses her path. I wrote Rosemary into my little tiny book in Peterborough, Women on the Ballot, because what she didn't mention was she also ran locally politically, threw her hat in and ran, and with such a charm, knocked on doors and offered to, it's what she does with her newspaper, what she does with those of us who have lifelong feminists. She lifts our souls. She challenges us to say, but, are we asking the right questions? Are we prevailing, persevering? And her resistance is irresistible. She somehow resists the most immovable institutions and ideas and possibilities and makes it materialize. So as a Canadian, I couldn't be prouder to be affiliated and back in close proximity out at the lake where I live now. And I just wanted to speak to her, her power of lifting all of us to be the best that we can be, to challenge the way we think, and to speak out, write out, and prayer our way out and above and beyond our obstacles. So Rosemary, my earphones off. I don't have a hat to raise to you, so my Bombardier earphones off. Thank you.
My gosh, this is enough. This is enough, Oh, I want to tell my sisterhood here, though, a little bit about 2018. That was a year to remember. Remember, I told you earlier that we in Peterborough had elected an Afghan refugee Muslim, our little all-white community. Anyway, she never forgot that. So when Mr. Trudeau, I'm a big fan of his too, when he's putting together this global group of women, this is what I imagine. I imagine he's walking down the halls of Parliament with Mariam, and he's saying, I've got the African, I've got the Japanese, I've got all the sexualities, all the colors represented here. I need an old, white, progressive. And Mariam said, I got just a person. I know that's what happened. She hasn't told me. Anyway, the Prime Minister calls me at 6 o'clock at night, and you want to keep him on the phone, right? So he says, so I said, Mr. Prime Minister, what do you want of me? And he said, your voice, your experience, and your grassroots connections. And I said, I got that. That's all I got. And then I wanted to keep a little longer. So I said, by the way, Mr. Prime Minister, I'm a member of Catholics for Choice. And there's a long laugh. And he says, well, you must have had your dust ups. I'm thinking of Terry Prendergast of Ottawa. He's the Archbishop, and we've had a dust up. Anyway, and then he said, the Prime Minister, I am too. So who was on that committee? Melinda Gates. And I had a chat with her. I said, how does the Gates Foundation and your Catholic faith, which is a little more traditional than mine, mesh? And she said, oh, on important issues, my church and I just agree to disagree. And I took that from Melinda. She's a fine person. And then Malala Yousafzai from Pakistan, and Winnie Byanyima of United Nations Women. Oh, and when we are ourselves, Winnie Byanyima is from Uganda. We're on the bus going to meet the G7 leaders. The leaders. I get to meet Mr. Italy, he's gone now, Conte on this side. And who's the president of the UK? Theresa May. On this side, I'm making conversation with them. I forget where I was going to go with that story, Mary. Oh,
Not to worry, we'll take it wherever.
okay.
But I think one thing to say is that those essays that reflect that period will be in the next volume.
Yes,
So
that's right.
Betsy, the one that you mentioned will be in there, I'm sure.
Oh,
So
I know what the story was. Winnie and I are on the bus going to this remote place where the G7 leaders, and Winnie says, you have a Catholic background, don't you? Yes. So do I. Let's pray. Leave it to the global South women, right? And so she starts to pray, and the other women gather around, and they say, go on the PA. So we all pray. Come, Holy Spirit, fill the hearts of your faithful. No, I can't imagine any gathering of men going to that level.
Thank you, Rosemary. And I'm sure they went home and said, wait till you hear about this woman I met from Canada. Oh my God. Imagine little Malala going home and saying, oh, it was so smart. And then of course, Melinda Gates probably went home to Bill that night and said, Bill,
yeah.
Missed the boat, and it is a big ship. It's right in Peterborough, Ontario, Bill.
Oh yeah.
Get a grip, Bill Gates. So I hear those conversations, Rosemary, I'm sure. Cynthia Tootle, you had your hand up. Or maybe you were just gesturing.
No, it's definitely was a hand up.
Good.
I'm in awe with what you've been doing, and I have this question that's maybe on the small side. As you may know, that here in America, there is a lot of prejudice being shown towards Asian American and Pacific Islanders, and I belong to a church that is majority Black, and we came out very forcefully in our little world, a little corner of the world, about the Black Lives Matter. But I'm trying to figure out how to articulate or to call into our little segment of the community that is Asian American, which we definitely have some of. So it's almost like I'm not sure I want to voice it. I want to find a way to give a platform to those people. And I was wondering how you do that with an issue that's like, you don't want to assume someone else's issue, but you would like to get them a chance.
Cynthia, I think it was St. Francis himself who said, I preach the gospel everywhere I go, and sometimes I use words.
Yeah, right.
And I think some flowers or a note or some cookies to a nearest Asian friendship center or worship place or even business, just an unspoken gesture of solidarity, if we could multiply those. That's what I would say is using your voice. Now, also, as far as newspapers, I don't know how long newspapers are going to last, actually, but the best read section is the letters to the editor. Just 4 lines. I deeply regret. My heart is broken. I am so sorry. And for my forgetfulness or for not, but anyway, I just regret the loss of life, the discrimination and racism, and sign with whatever credentials you got.
Okay, thank you.
I'm not inviting women who are burdened to take on more responsibilities. Just you know, the delivery of cookies, which we do anyway.
Yeah,
Yeah.
thank you. Good ideas.
And I also believe in alerting the press. The person in this town who does the most good is the photographer. He shows up. He shows up everywhere. They're selling bowls for the YWCA. He's got all his bowls. There's a good joke. He's well loved. You just have to feed him. You have to feed him. And we always do. And no cause is too small. Like, he likes kids on bikes and so on, and old people walking. But I think that he is the leading moral educator in this town. Never mind those who are preaching in the churches.
Sage. Mary Ellen, go ahead.
Thank you so much, Rosemary. Just wonderful and inspiring to hear your energy and your message and your stories. And I just wanted to pass on real thanks that years ago, Rosemary and I didn't know each other very well, and we met at a Catholic Network for Women's Equality Conference in New Brunswick, and we sat on a step, and I think I was complaining to Rosemary about this work that we're doing, and we're writing letters and petitions, and you know, the church isn't listening, and we're talking about dialogue, but there's no one on the other side of the table. And Rosemary said, you have to go out, you have to go out. And I've often thought of the reading from wisdom, and that she calls from the intersection, she calls from the crossroads. And I feel like that's what a lot of us can and are doing in this time. And I thank you, Rosemary, for that inspiration, is to say, to reach the people, if you can't do it through the clergy or the hierarchy, that you go to the people in the press. And now I say we have a wonderful element with going to the people in Facebook or events like this, and just getting the word out after we leave today, getting the word out, doing one more thing that we can do to get the word out. So thank you for that real spark of inspiration years ago, and really appreciate it. It continues, Rosemary. Thanks.
Yeah. Well, maybe the church has done us a favor by shutting us up or shutting us out, because then we have sought other avenues. We're not going to live our lives, our short lives, in frustration. We're just not. It doesn't make us a good friend, doesn't make us a good parent or grandparent. So that those guys are giving me major frustration. So how can I get around them?
Thank you. Yes. Good. Mary Yelenick, please go ahead.
Hi, Rosemary.
Hi, Mary.
I've loved meeting you on these Zoom calls, but I feel like I know you, and I really like you. What I like so much about you is that you've had such remarkable experiences, unusual experiences.
Yes.
And most men, I think, the men I know anyway, would try to appropriate those and put them in a box and say, I've got this special talent, and I've got this special expertise and this special in. You don't do that. You come back with the box and you open it up and say, I met so-and-so, and she said this, or I met this fellow, we had this conversation. You make it very accessible to everyone. You bring those foreign experiences to some and make them local. You make people. You make us understand how related we all are, and how listening to someone and acknowledging that makes such a difference in human dynamics. And so thank you for that. You're just so good at that. And I must say that every time I hear you, I get a jolt of joy. And thank you for that.
Oh boy. Oh boy. Let's keep those multiplying. About the joy. It will increase the good that we do, help us sleep better, and model for others whatever vocation you have taken on, do it with real vigor, and don't add to the complaining and the despairing that is there, but it's a sign of anxiety, that these are real hard times. And I thank my ancestors for my recovery time. And I like good jokes too. And I keep in mind, as far as the readers go, the teenage boy reluctant reader. I've known them for 30 years. And we were pals. We were pals.
Well, I think I'm going to end our formal conversation on that note. To be pals with teenage boys, I think is one of the great feats of human prowess. And I want to thank Rosemary again. I want to invite people to stay on and chat if you'd like to. I'd like to adjourn us for today, thanking Rosemary and wishing you a very happy birthday on Thursday, Rosemary. I hope it's a great day. And we will be with you in spirit. And we, usually Catholics begin on the eve, so we're starting on the day before the eve. Yeah. So that's as close as we could get. But wonderful wishes to you for a healthy year ahead, and more of this resistance and challenge, and more of your voice. And thank you for inviting us to raise ours as well.
Thanks,
Thank
Mary.
you so much.
Thank you, Mary.
You're welcome. The floor is open. We'll just unmute. People can stay on and chat. So, what a rich hour.
Yeah.
Wonderful.
I got one more story. Can you stand it?
No, but we'll put up with it, Rosemary. Go ahead.
At least it'll be new for me, Rosemary, anyway.
For Sheila.
Yeah, come on, Rosemary.
The request came from Beth LaRock in New Brunswick. Now, in 2004, we have a big flood in Peterborough. No loss of life, but a lot of poor people's apartments are flooded out. So we older women, led by our feminist mayor, say we got to have a fundraiser. We got to get some funds to these basement apartments. 2004.
I know this story. Go ahead, Rosemary.
So we gather and we drink wine and we say to each other, "Oh, Carolyn, in this town, you stand for writing." So, the mayor is an Anglophile. She loves everything British. And she has just seen the movie Calendar Girls. Do you know where this is going?
No.
So we decide, anyway, we have to have an 18-month calendar. So many women want in. And the photographer, who's a lovely young man, says, "I'll bring my 15-year-old daughter to all the photo shoots." And so they look at me drinking wine and say, "In this town, you stand for global awareness." So they get me a globe. The purpose is, right, that we strip to the waist. Mary, I don't know if you want this on water.
We have a copy of the calendar, actually.
Oh, okay.
We a copy, Rosemary, not to worry. We have a copy. We're over 18 here. Yeah.
We've seen it, Rosemary. It's gorgeous.
It is. It's black and white. And it raises $100,000.
Wow.
And Eloise gets the money out, no bureaucracy. You come in and you say, "I lost my couch, my fridge, my stove." How much? 3,000. Anyway, so the photographer meets us. And my friends give me a globe of the world, right? And the first one's not big enough. So we get a bigger one. And I put on my Jamaican hat. No.
Oh.
And I am Miss November. Sarah, have you ever seen this? And anyway, it's just before Christmas and we sell these things, but one Catholic priest, oh, the United Church minister wears her stole. She wears her stole. It's all very, honestly, it's not shocking. It's really not shocking. Oh, there she is. Anyway, we take it to the mall and we sell it out. And my grandchildren say, oh, grandma, bare bum. Well, that's enough. But I thought, oh, and there's the mayor. The mayor poses in a pond with the newspaper. Now, oh, but I met a priest on the street, and you know what he said? He said, Rosemary, Rosemary. So that, you know, that was early training in resisting his kind. Yeah. Now, trot among yourselves.
Sheila, did you know that Mary is in the Irish Times today?
Oh,
Yes.
Mary's essay.
Yes.
Yeah, version. She told me, but she sent me the
A shortened version with a picture of two men's crotches, which I thought was rather unusual.
Yeah, it wasn't very good.
No, but when you print it out, it doesn't show. You don't see the men. So
yeah, even to
It's
get
my article from
Patsy
Belgium.
to do that was even something because he's not. Patsy has his own issues, as they say. But anyway, it's good. That
Who's that?
Patsy McGarry, the religious correspondent for the Irish.
Oh, I don't know.
You're lucky. Just take it. You're lucky. You really don't need to know Patsy. It's too long on the job, too long around, and thinks he knows it all anyway.
Well, anyway, there it is. So
good.
I'm hoping it'll give a little support to Mary McAleese, who's been getting a lot of flack, I'm told.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, she used strong words.
Mm.
Mary McAleese.
Well, there has been quite a lot of letters, and there's been quite a lot of discontent as well in other circles. So, like, I mean, there is quite a lot of disgust with the Vatican statements. So it's like everything else. People, you know, when Ireland got when we passed same-sex marriage here, you know, people have moved way ahead now. You know, so they just don't even. A lot of people now don't even entertain it. You know, years ago that would have had such an impact in Catholic Ireland, but not with the way things have moved so quickly, you know. And for older people, because, you know, it was their lived experience of meeting people from different sexual persuasions that made, you know, the overwhelming result in the when we changed our laws here. So that's what people kind of go back. The majority, not there's some, of course, who'll never, you know, but it kind of has made it that people kind of think, well, get a life, church, you know, get on, you know, because people have done all of the work of trying to understand, have come to terms with different things that they mightn't have done before in this country. So that's the only good thing, because we have it in law. That people across all ages have learned differently, which is good. Church mightn't, but the people have.
Yeah, that's why I always say that the only reason I deal with these things in the public arena is because kids kill themselves. And you know, that's really the reason, is to prevent violence. And I also think of these statements as theological pornography.
Oh yeah.
Because they focus, they oppress individuals.
Wow.
Which is what pornography does. It singles out persons and focuses on them in an oppressive way. And secondly, it's sexually focused. It's all focused on genital sex and not on love and care. And then thirdly, it leads to violence. And I think that those three criteria of secular pornography are exactly what's being played out here. And I've written on this elsewhere, but I'm going to write about it again. But that's the reason I deal with it at all, because it is an occasion of theological pornography. And I think it's as serious as any other form of pornography in the culture. And kids kill themselves. Just keep that in mind. Children, young people who are LGBT, questioning, whatever, they still kill themselves. And it's so, as much as, you know, we in the US like to think we're so secular and this and that, kids kill themselves when they hear this sort of stuff. And I not on my watch. I always tell people, not on my watch. If I can say something and they'll say one young, 16-year-old, your boys with their big feet on the desks, Rosemary.
Yeah.
One of them who thinks he's sinful.
Yeah.
We don't have a choice. Don't have a choice.
No.
And I think that's the only good thing that happened here now, is that it opened a conversation again for people to be saying, especially because it took so long in Ireland for that to be an open conversation. And, certainly people killed themselves as a result of it, as well as the people left Ireland because of it. People left their homes, never to return. There's everything. But at least now, because it was such an open secular question, that people were kind of going, well, I don't believe that. And who can give out blessings? What priest is going to, and so you have clergy having to respond to some of it. You have other clergy who, of course, there's always the right. But I know that it doesn't have the, because people can at least now say, I don't believe that. I won't even, because people don't go to church at the moment because of the lockdown. You have all these people saying, well, I don't care if I never go inside that door. That's not, we're bigger than this. So in that sense, but there's still, huge work needs to be done. And it's not to minimize the damage that anything that comes out that is, not of God in any sense of the word has to be challenged, But it certainly didn't get.
It's also interesting in the comments to my article, at least the ones I've read so far, there's such an animus toward religion in general. And I think that's an interesting phenomenon in Ireland, that to go from sort of one very focused, almost monolithic Irish culture, not entirely, of course, but to go from that to an animus toward religion in general. I happen to think that religion does offer and can offer so many good things, that it's sort of
in Ireland,
especially the justice arena.
To be Catholic at the moment in Ireland is not a good thing.
That's right. No,
in Ireland, it's not a good thing. And there's no diversity, because of so many, yes, we have a horrendous history, and that's not to deny that, but it is a very difficult space to try to get a space that looks at it differently and not see us all as, we're supposed to cherish everybody in the state equally. I'll tell you, if a family had a misdemeanor, somebody that did something wrong in the family, they would never have to pay the price that religious congregations have to do for the wrong that has been committed in the past. So right now it is and you couldn't open your mouth at any level without it getting, slammed back at you for whatever, especially women's religious congregations. And
one good thing, just a jolt of joy, Mary Ellen, I'm going to be using that and quoting you for the rest of my life. A jolt of joy.
Yeah.
The Sisters of Mercy here, not the community, but the international leadership team, the ILT of the Sisters of Mercy, have just put out a very good statement. Carolyn, you're nodding your head. A very good statement about their disappointment about the document from last week. The ILT of the Sisters of Mercy. Carolyn, did you want to mention it?
Wasn't very long, but I did, of course, read it because I'm an associate, so I get all their communications, and I was pleased to see that, but not surprised, because they and other women's congregations are always at the front of, being in the place they should be.
Yeah.
Sisters of St. Joseph also put out a very good statement. The group in which group? The one that Chris Shank belongs to.
Cleveland?
Maybe Cleveland, yeah. They put out a very good statement.
Yeah, Cleveland.
Does it seem to you that there's much more positive reaction? I mean, people that are not positive, but negative reaction to the statement, positive reaction to the cause this time than before, or am I just dreaming?
So
I think you're absolutely right. I'm keeping a file. I have a file here. It's called Current Research. And it's getting thicker every day with these kinds of statements. The first one from the Italian families, parents of LGBT kids in Italy. They wrote the most powerful. They had met with the Pope in September, and they said, listen, we met with you. And now we're back. Guess what? We're back. And they're not happy. So yeah, absolutely. I think this may be like what Humanae Vitae was. People saw
definitely,
what the church is about, and they reject it, and that's that. And every time it happens, they lose market share, and with the pandemic even more. So I think they've shot themselves in both feet. And I think my guess is that somebody will come forward with a little bit of a clarification, or guess what, we were only kidding, or somebody, there's already so many of these simply little arguments about how the Pope, I was laughing with Diane. I said, yeah, the Pope was getting ready for his travels, and he lost that black sock. He couldn't find that other black sock. He was trying to put those pairs together. And then somebody came by and said, oh, here,
sign here.
Yeah, sign here. Didn't even know what he was doing. Poor soul, getting ready to looking for his passport, looking for his, his phrase book, and he's so busy. So I think there's a lot of people trying to give him, trying to let him off the hook. I don't think it's going to work.
Unless he does it himself.
Yeah, unless he does it himself on his knees.
Yeah.
Because this is so despicable, especially as I say to young people. This is so and if wasn't even same-sex marriage, a blessing. Hello, I love the Irish priest. Darcy is his last name.
Brian Darcy, yeah.
Darcy was on the radio the other day in Ireland, and he said, if I can bless a submarine going to war, I felt like saying, why would you do that? I can bless a same-sex couple. I thought, well, that,
Well, what was worse, we had a guy on the radio. I just find that offensive in itself. But and when these priests come on and say, well, on St. Patrick's Day I was blessing weeds. I'm sure I could gladly bless a couple. And I'm going, isn't that really uplifting? So now you're just like a weed. If you get yourself into a hole, keep digging further. Instead of just saying that the language of the statement is offensive, it's violent, really, and it's not of God, full stop. And whoever drew it up, whoever signed it, or whatever the politics of the internal workings of the Vatican and who does what, at the end of the day, that goes out in their name. And, that's the bottom line. And no more than you say about Humanae Vitae, which we're still fighting for centuries, it's the same type of stuff. It should never have been there. It should never go out. And, like everything else, to claw it back takes a hell of a lot more work than having it gone out in the first place. And they have not learned that lesson. That you just don't put somebody else's little wishes. And, other people are saying it was because of the German bishops and the synod that they were having, and, they wanted to preempt them and whatever it might be. But at the end of the day, it's violent and it's destructive and it's not helpful. It's not helpful to anybody. Thankfully, if you are in a space where you believe that God's much bigger, it's great. But as you rightly say, Mary, it hits home to some people. And in this culture where there still is a percentage of people who were under a Catholic ethos that was detrimental, it just beats that, just as, well, we knew there was always something wrong. And, while for others, like in the civic space that ignore religion completely, it doesn't really make an impact. But there is going to be the percentage of people who are struggling with maybe the knowledge of maybe a family member or whatever, and then secretly go and say, well, maybe now we are going to go to hell. Maybe, maybe they were right, and it's all of that it can feed when you don't have a good theological basis, where you don't have people who are educated theologically, and you have some idiots who use it to their nth degree, So, but the debate at least is more open, and particularly because of the change in the civic law here, it made that people at least go at it from a wee bit of a different angle, but certainly not in terms of good theologies. But, hey, at least your stuff got printed by Patsy McGarry, and that's an advantage point, and there has been some good letters in the paper over the time, but there will always be backlash as well, of course.
It doesn't make sense from a political point of view either. If it was a political calculation, if he was trying to appease some of his right-wing enemies, of whom he has many, didn't help them. It didn't make them like him anymore. And he certainly lost a lot of goodwill with people who've been trying to stick him on certain issues. And that number is really dwindling. There was an event yesterday, and people who ordinarily would have been supporting him decided not to even to attend. So it's, I'm sure someone's going to regret this a great deal. And not only the people that are hurt directly, but the people who, for whatever reason, decided to do this, which made no sense.
But it limits his credibility, and everything else, because, you can't think about a Laudato Si perspective and then say what you said. It just doesn't equate that all of nature, all of things that are created is beautiful. So it just doesn't equate. So as you say, and it is hard for those of us that try to be pulling any which way door that has been open to keep pushing it. But yeah, it's no, certainly didn't do himself any favors at any level.
I was thinking of the use that he made of the worldly wisdom when he wrote Laudato Si. And even the one on his critique of neoliberal economics.
Yeah.
He was smart enough to say, I don't know about this, but I will bring in the best minds. What I'm calling for is a sexual issues advisory council with real clout, made up of only women.
But you see, unfortunately, too, the theology in Laudato Si isn't good. The scientific and all of that is very good, but like the theological stuff is not good. And it's the same in Fratelli Tutte. It's the same, you know, like it was in the Amazon Synod. You know, they're you know, on the social, political, and cultural issues, you know, certainly, as you say, very good people's research and things are used. But when it comes to the fundamentals around theological thinking, there's a gap.
And well, but there's another, but Sheila, I think there's another gap too, and that is that on the more scientific, social scientific questions around economics and war, the church, the Catholic Church has for a long time, not always, but particularly in this pontificate and even the last one, brought to bear some very good secular information. That is to say, they really do get, even the nuclear path, the anti-nuclear pastoral years ago, written by Brian Hare. You know, popes don't write encyclicals. They have Brian Hare wrote the bishop's statement here on the Catholic bishop's statement here on nuclear stuff. But popes don't write their own. I mean, popes don't write encyclicals. That's not their thing. But they bring in people who do the writing, whether for Laudato Si. I mean, Pope Francis did not write Laudato Si. Let's be frank. I mean, he had some good people. Leonardo Boff, for example, from Brazil, was one of the major writers of Laudato Si, or the great, you know, there's arguably a great liberation theologian. The point is that for that particular encyclical and for some others, the admission of evidence, the methodology was that you could admit as evidence so-called secular sources. There is nothing on sexuality for which those equivalent sources have been admitted as evidence for discussing the question. That's the problem. It's not just and the theological that Sheila points out, but the problem is methodological. That on economics you can bring in good studies, on the environment you can bring in scientific data, but on sexuality they don't even care that there are whole other anthropologies and understandings of the fluidity and diversity of sex and gender. That all that material, which they call gender ideology, is not admitted as evidence. And so that's a fundamental issue, methodological issue, that will prevent ad nauseum any kind of a good statement on sexuality. Because if you don't bring in the materials that you need to ground it the way we do in Catholic theology, you're not going to have it. Good luck. That's the methodological difference. You can see it if you go through the footnotes of Laudato Si or any of the we call it Tutti Frutti here, the most recent Tutti Frutti. If you look at Tutti Frutti, you know, the documentation includes more than just earlier papal documents, whereas anything on sexuality only includes earlier Vatican documents, sometimes biblical sources, but certainly not with gold standard exegesis. So that's just, you know, that's a problem.
Oh, at least we don't have to depend on them, but anyway, it's terrible. Like,
God forbid. But we do have to protect our children. We do, and our grandchildren.
Protect thinking, you know, like people thinking.
They cannot hear that pornography. They may not hear that pornography. They may not, we do not want them exposed to that.
No, that's true.
A serious question. Not to have children exposed to it. I think it's a very serious, I take it as a responsibility. I mean, I'm not, I know, but honest to goodness, no. Just say to a child, for example, say to my daughter, your mothers who've only been together 40 years are not worthy of a blessing. I don't want her to even know about that.
No, that somebody said so.
I don't want her to even know that somebody said that.
Yeah.
Because, you know, she said, oh, those two, you know, I got my problems with them too, but, you you know, she thinks of us as Amex and Visa card or ATM and her cousin, you know, but no, she's a darling. But I don't want her to hear that. I don't want my child to hear that. And I don't want anybody's child to hear that. Because that in my view is sinful. That participates in something that I would, and I don't use, have you ever heard me use the term sin? I never. Yeah, I could consider that sinful.
Yeah. Well, you're getting twice your money's worth today, women.
And Joe Cinto.
And Joe.
Yeah, Joe's first day back in the office, and he was 88 this week. So last week he was 88. So he's, yeah, he's. I think he's getting ready to blow this pop stand, but he's.
So you don't have lockdown anymore in Washington, D.C.? You're able to go to work and you're able to do things?
3 days a week we come in, yeah. I mean, we're careful. We have our masks and our, you know, we've all been vaccinated.
Yeah, but you can move. We're still in lockdown and we're still with very high numbers relatively to the country. And
we may be going back that way. I wouldn't be surprised. It's not looking good here.
And it was terrible in your country as well.
Colorado with Boulder. Are you in Colorado or are you in New York?
No, I'm in New York. Yeah, I'm in New York.
Oh God, that was an awful shooting in Colorado.
Yeah, the shooting in Boulder last night, just horrific. Mary's mother lives in Denver.
Well, friends of mine live in Boulder, and they were shopping in that supermarket the day before.
Oh my!
Really? Yes, but they are safe. And in former times, lived just across the street.
That's one thing that in Canada you certainly don't have the same level of gun violence, and nowhere does really, and it's something that we really have to put on the top of our agenda.
Yeah.
So serious.
It's on the increase here in Ireland, I can tell you, not to mass shootings of shopping centres or that, but gangland, gun killing, drug dealing and wheeling and that type of stuff is big here, you know, and it's on the increase horrifically because people now don't, you know, like I worked in a very big drug area in the early 90s when the kind of stuff was growing in Ireland, and you could have approached dealers, you could have gone to the bit, you know, just say you, as a group of people, you don't come into this area. You could have, you know, you were never, like I lived in a flat complex. I was never afraid they were going to do me in or anything like it. Now you wouldn't even say anything. And, you know, it's just that they shoot before they have any answers. And it's young people that are being shot because they're drunk runners and they're not getting the money or they're not passing on the thing. And they're, you know, one gang's, it's a bit like West Side Story thing, you know, it's a bit like that here at the moment, but it's on the increase. And, you know, we wouldn't have had that, like, and the same with family suicides, like, you know, killing a whole family, shooting people like that has become much more frequent in this culture than it ever was, ever. I'm sure there was some level happened that we never knew because of media or whatever that you get to know more, but nothing to the extent that you're hearing at the moment, that, you know, maybe every couple of months you hear of some family that has killed all the members of their family for whatever reason. So you're not, I mean, it's not to the same extent as the US, but like certainly when I lived in Chicago, I couldn't believe when I went in and you could see guns, Walmart, the people could go and buy them, you know, going like, really? But certainly here it's on the increase, you know. And knife crime, which is the other thing. Violence is real everywhere. It's just different context.
Well, I think we need a jolt of joy before we close here. So I want to thank Rosemary Ganley again. This was Rosemary, just wonderful, really wonderful. And to have so many of your friends and family and so many of your newer friends, those of us who I would call it your newer friends. Yeah. You really do. You lift up all our voices and you invite us all to something more. And that really, that's a help. That's a help. I can't thank you enough, really. It's just marvelous. And friends, thank you very much. Have a great day.
Thank you all, everybody. Have a good day.